Scopper and Robin have stepped up just as we knew they would after chapter 1147. Scopper's aura is maxing out. There is another silver fox entering the granddaddy leagues in One Piece, taking his rightful place next to Rayleigh, next to Garp, and we love to see it. Chapter 1148, I'm gonna have to say, is a solid 8.8 out of 10, and not just because that rhymes. But before we begin, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, now is the time. Help me, your fellow One Piece fan, reach 100,000 subscribers, and in return, I will make sure that you never run out of One Piece content. Now, with that said, we have to talk about Scopper Gaban. Ever since he showed up at One Piece, just as we expected that he would, fans have been watching him closely, waiting to see what his role is going to be. We knew he was going to be important, we know that he was one of the heavy hitters of the Roger Pirates, and now we are finally seeing what he's really capable of. Because as we suspected, it seems that Scopper does indeed have the answer to the regenerative abilities of the God's Knights. And actually, this answer may be a really obvious one? Like, we all should have known how to beat this really annoying ability. Because from what we can see in chapter 1148, apart from how cool this panel is, apart from how peak this panel is, how much it invokes the hype of Zoro Shishisan-son, but with the new aura of the prior left-hand man of the previous pirate king, it also does just seem like Scopper has imbued his axe with Conqueror's Haki. And it seems like that may have been enough to stop Summers from being able to regenerate his arm. Begging the question, is the answer to the gobsmacking, really pesky regenerative ability really just Conqueror's Haki? I mean, surely not, right? I feel like there has to be more than just Conqueror's Haki to being the solution, because in that case, you'd have to ask, why was Luffy having such a hard time against the Gorosei back at Egghead Island? Well, I'll tell you why. It actually seems like Luffy didn't imbue his attacks with Conqueror's Haki against the Gorosei back at Egghead Island. I just assumed that he did fight with Conqueror's Haki against the Gorosei, but I actually went back to quickly skim through the arc, quickly skim through the skirmishes against the Gorosei, and maybe I missed something, and if I have, then by all means, please let me know in the comments below. But based on what I could see, it seemed very apparent that Luffy actually wasn't using Conqueror's Haki against any of his clashes with the Gorosei. He does seem to imbue his attacks with armament Haki. I mean, for example, he uses Dawn Gatling against Saturn, Dawn Balloon against Mars, and Red Rock against Walkuri. But I don't actually see him use any attacks imbued with advanced Conqueror's Haki. And weirdly enough, this seems like it's just against the Gorosei as well, because in that very same arc, we do actually see that he was imbuing some of his attacks against Kizaru with Conqueror's Haki, because we see him use Star Gun, Gomu Gomu no Star Gun, which is imbued with both armament and Conqueror's Haki. So why not against the Gorosei? Especially after he quite quickly realized during that arc that they were very pesky combatants, because no matter what they did, no matter what attack Luffy was throwing at them, they just kept coming back. He realized quite quickly that they were immortal. So I feel like throwing out your strongest attacks, aka your attacks imbued with Conqueror's Haki, I feel like that would be the most obvious, most natural thing to do, but apparently not. I mean, especially after his experiences at Wano, we know he saw himself how important it was to imbue your attacks with Conqueror's Haki. We saw this against Kaido. Kaido even spelt it out for him. It doesn't matter what your devil fruit is, Haki conquers all. And I get that narratively speaking, Wano and Egghead are completely different scenarios. Luffy knew that his only option was to win. The goal at Wano was to win and defeat Kaido or die trying. Whereas at Egghead, the objective was very different. He wasn't necessarily trying to win against the Gorosei. He just needed to find a way for him, his crew, for Vegapunk to escape safe and sound. So maybe from that standpoint, Luffy just figured, well, it seems like these Gorosei aren't going to fall anyways. We're not going to be able to defeat them. I may as well conserve some of my energy. Let's just find a way out. And I also guess from like a writing standpoint, if Luffy did actually use Advanced Conqueror's Haki all throughout Egghead Island arc, and if that really was the answer to defeating the Gorosei, then well, I mean, I guess that would have just been too easy. And Luffy could quite quickly enlist the help of Zoro, who also knows how to imbue his attacks with Conqueror's Haki, and well, where's the fun in that? If these two already have the ability to not just battle against, but actually defeat some of the top combatants in the world, the penultimate level before we get to the final boss Imu, I mean, that would just be too easy. Oda still has to find some way to make them not necessarily underdogs, but they can't be too overpowered, or at least even more than they already are. But with all of that being said, I still have to say it does feel a little weird that Luffy wouldn't use Conqueror's Haki, especially when we know that he's such a strong, instinctual fighter. I mean, we saw this especially back at Wano. We saw him quite quickly figure out why Kaido's attacks were so strong, why he was so devastating. Luffy was very astutely able to observe and say, hey, you're imbuing your attacks with the Supreme King, the color of the Supreme King, aren't you? Like, that is who Luffy is. He's a very instinctual fighter. So the fact that he didn't try any attack imbued with Conqueror's Haki against the Gorosei, no Gomu Gomu, no Bajrangan, to me it feels a little strange, but you can let me know what you think. Now I feel a little stupid that each week I have been wondering, what is the answer? Ever since the God's Knights were revealed to also have this very annoying capability, I have been wondering, how are the Straw Hats going to get out of this one? What is the answer? But the answer may have really been so simple. But I shouldn't get ahead of myself because the solution hasn't actually been confirmed as of yet. It hasn't been confirmed that it really is just straight up simply Conqueror's Haki. And the fact that Scopper is actually here in this arc, it must mean that he's here to teach the crew something, to teach Luffy something, meaning that it has to be more than just simply Conqueror's Haki. I mean, obviously, Scopper Gaban is here for a reason. This isn't just some legacy character popping in to get a cool moment just for the sake of it. He's not just a souvenir from the past. Scopper is here to be a teacher. He's here to be a bridge between eras, just the same way that Rayleigh was. And it was actually noted during our reaction stream that there is a really nice symmetry, a really nice parallel going on between Rayleigh and Scopper's appearance here. A nice callback to the lessons that Luffy and the Straw Hats learned back at Sabaody. We're getting a repeat of that here at Elbaf, because if you remember, back in the Sabaody arc, the crew was faced with a very similar dilemma. They had no answer to the Logia Devil Fruit. Faced against Kizaru's Pika Pika no Mi, no one could do anything. They were helpless. And back then, it was Rayleigh that came to the rescue with a lesson on armament Haki. In fact, it was our first real formal introduction to Haki. We may have seen it being hinted at earlier. According to some translations, the term Haki may have even been used, but it was really Rayleigh that properly showed us what Haki means, how to use it, how to harness it. And when no one could land a hit on Kizaru, Rayleigh was the first one to do so. In fact, when it seemed all hope was lost, it was Rayleigh who got that epic entrance and landed an attack on Kizaru that no one else managed to do so far. Which of course is exactly what we're seeing here. Scopper gets that epic entrance. Scopper has done the impossible. He has landed a hit on one of Imu's immortal puppets, a hit that Summers can't recover from. He can't regenerate. Meaning that just as Rayleigh did before him, Scopper is here to teach us a new level of Haki, a new lesson on Haki. And I personally think that that lesson is going to be how to harness all three modes of Haki simultaneously. Observation, armament, conquerors all at once. I think that's the answer to becoming a true Haki master, and I think that is the answer to bypass the regeneration ability. So, the way I see this work is that observation Haki is needed to see, to visualize, and identify your opponent's vulnerability, the optimal place to attack. Armament should be pretty obvious because we know that it's needed against the powers of a Devil Fruit user, especially Logia Devil Fruits, to make contact with your opponent. But then also, armament is needed to cause internal damage, which makes sense from a regeneration standpoint. And then Conqueror's Haki, well, that's needed to dominate the will of your opponent. This domination allows you to enhance your destructive capabilities, which is definitely needed when you're going against someone at the level of a God's Knight. And I think it's all of this combined, coming everything together that gives you that ultimate strength, ultimate capability, and I think this is what Scopper is going to train the Straw Hats in, or at least the monster trio. Because the fact that Conqueror's Haki is still needed as part of this combination means that we still are faced with a major limiter, because obviously not everyone has Conqueror's Haki. It's a super rare ability, even when it comes to the Straw Hats. Only Luffy and Zoro are confirmed to harness Conqueror's Haki. So the fact that Haki is simply the answer to regeneration, that doesn't mean that it's actually a really super easy feat. Only a very select few will be able to achieve this. In which case, that actually leaves open the possibility of which of our crew members are also going to unlock their Supreme King Haki. I mean, how wild would it be if Nami reaches breaking point with her maternal instincts, which was on full display in chapter 1148. These maternal instincts really take hold. She can't just keep it in anymore, and that is the key to unlocking her own Conqueror's Haki. I mean, she definitely looked like she was ready to explode in this chapter. Or Usopp. All of us have been considering that Elbaf is going to be Usopp's arc. Although I have to say personally, I have had my own doubts about this happening, as you may know from a very recent video of mine. And if you haven't watched that video, then I do recommend that you check it out. My video questioning whether Usopp will actually get a big moment at Elbaf. But that being said, Usopp has lied about having Conqueror's Haki before, and we know that his lies often come true, so who knows, maybe he really will unlock Conqueror's Haki here at Elbaf, giving fans the much awaited relief of his continued character development. But obviously not all the Straw Hats are going to have Conqueror's Haki by the end of the arc, probably not even by the end of the series. And so I do think that this means that their roles are going to be divided pretty soon. It seems like the other Straw Hats are probably going to be instrumental in fighting these dream monsters that Killingham has conjured in this arc, whereas those with Conqueror's Haki will be the ones fighting against the Holy Knights. In which case, outside of the Straw Hat crew, it's also unclear how many of the Elbafian giants have Conqueror's Haki. I actually wouldn't be surprised if most of the Elbafians, or even all of the Elbafians, don't actually have Conqueror's Haki, maybe even any form of Haki. Because of the giants' natural strength, their natural raw power, their size, it's possible that the Elbafians have never really been challenged to the point of ever unlocking their Haki. And that seems to be what happens. Haki, and especially Conqueror's Haki, that seems to be a force that is awakened during some dire circumstances. It's when you need that superhuman strength, that superhuman willpower to achieve very unlikely odds. That's when we usually see a Haki awaken. Apart from the fact that when it comes to Conqueror's Haki, obviously you also have to be born with those kingly qualities. But I would just say that the giants have never really been in a position where they felt threatened enough, where they felt like they had to unlock even more any latent strength. I mean, they are brave and strong-willed as it is. Who's going to be challenging the Warland Elbafians? I mean, I'm sure plenty of them have the potential. In fact, even when it comes to Conqueror's Haki, I'm sure many of them have kingly qualities. And maybe this is actually what's setting us up to see Loki and Hadroden unlock their Conqueror's Haki, because, I mean, out of all the Elbafians, these two would be the most obvious to have Supreme King qualities, seeing as they are literally of a king's bloodline. And I'm sure many of you will think that Loki may already have Conqueror's Haki, but I actually think that he may not. And the reason I say that is because that could actually be the reason why Shanks was able to defeat Loki, because Shanks had Conqueror's Haki whereas Loki didn't. Or maybe at least Loki didn't have the ability to harness all three modes of Haki altogether, whereas Shanks has already mastered that. My point is, I'm sure Elbaf would be full of many brave warriors who would be worthy of the color of the Supreme King. But I think this focus on Haki, and Conqueror's Haki especially, establishes a really important and very interesting setup for the inevitable final war. It seems like that ultimately the battle between the immortal final level players like the Gorosei, like the Holy Knights, like Imu, they're going to be fought only by those who have Conqueror's Haki. Everyone else may just be supporting players, which then of course raises questions like, what what about Sanji? Sanji is part of our monster trio. What about Jinbei? I mean, have their roles to bow down at a certain point already been decided? And I was never expecting Sanji to fight against Imu, but against one of the Gorosei? Sure, the Holy Knights, yeah. And I'm not sure how to feel about Sanji being relegated to find a lesser opponent, while someone like Kid, just by the virtue of him having Conqueror's Haki, might mean that he might actually be back and play a much more important role in the final war. You know what I mean? And I do think that Sanji definitely embodies kingly qualities. I think he's someone that deserves Conqueror's Haki, that definitely is worthy of Conqueror's Haki, because when it comes to Sanji and when it comes to Conqueror's Haki, Sanji having will, having heart, that is so his domain. Conviction, that is who Sanji is. And come on, if Scopper as the left-hand man of the previous Pirate King is confirmed to have Conqueror's Haki, then surely between all the parallels between Scopper and Sanji, surely that means Sanji will awaken his Conqueror's Haki too. In fact, maybe that is what we are soon going to see here at Elbaf, Sanji also awakening his Conqueror's Haki, which is then going to be followed by a really fun training arc between the monster trio under Scopper Gaban, the monster trio having to fight each other to increase their Haki. Can you imagine the type of squabbling between Zoro and Sanji? Zoro gloating, haha, I unlocked my Conqueror's Haki earlier than you. And the fact that this is all happening at Elbaf just makes so much sense, because Elbaf, traditionally, it's all about the spirit. It's all about the will. The Elbafians are the bravest warriors of the sea, not just because of their sheer size, not because of just their giant strength, but because of their will. It's what makes them who they are, their conviction, their code, which ultimately that's what Haki and really what Conqueror's Haki is all about. But I think I have talked enough about Haki for now, so let's move on because there is so much to discuss about chapter 1148. So, Summers recognizes Gaban, meaning that these two have definitely crossed paths before, and oh my god, am I ready for that flashback. Give me peak Scopper goodness. Give me peak Scopper glory. I mean, I think it's safe to say that these two have probably clashed, have fought before, even if just briefly, and I think we are all imagining that that took place at God Valley. And I know you guys are just as excited as I am to witness that, as well as for this battle ahead at Elbaf to unfold. I mean, I have been long saying that a matchup between these two feels almost guaranteed, not just because they're two veterans, but because of their opposing views on love. They both have this love theme, but from very different angles, which, funny enough, Summers actually lent into his love theme a little bit in this chapter. I think it's hilarious that he is delusional and how he's interpreted the Robin situation as him, or as she having a crush on him, which is why I keep saying that I can't wait for not only the action, the combat between these two seasoned combatants, but also the quips about their opposing values, opposing views on love. But if it is action that you're interested in, then have no fear, because 1148 had plenty, no shortage of action. Not only the epic entrance, that epic panel we got of Scopper at the end of the chapter, but oh my god, come on, we all have to give our respect to the one and only Nico Robin, the queen herself. We got some real good old-fashioned Robin kicking ass, and we love to see it. She was boom, boom, crack, and throwing all these attacks, and even though I knew that it wasn't going to have any lasting effect because of Summers' regenerative abilities, it was still so satisfying getting to witness him just getting smacked around. Robin was also very quick on her feet, as Summers noted, coming up with strategies, and what can we say? She is a smart lady. Do not underestimate our girl. I'm just so happy to see Robin getting really cemented as one of the crew's top combatants. Given all the Haki implications of this chapter, it's actually kind of crazy that Oda hasn't already confirmed that Robin has at least armament Haki or observation Haki, especially the way that she was thinking ahead like a chess player in this chapter. Mwah! What's more exciting is that this definitely isn't the last that we've seen of her during the fight, being involved in the fight at Elbaf, because although Scopper has flown in to take care of Summers, based on the interaction with the other Straw Hats that are tied up here, it did seem like Robin was now going to take on Gunko, and I think that's gonna be a really fun matchup because of their respective devil fruits. I can already imagine Gunko getting really frustrated, throwing out all of these pouts, going, because I can imagine Robin is just going to keep confusing her with all of these clones, these multiple limbs, and Gunko is just going to be really flustered. And I don't want to sound like a broken record because I said this after chapter 1147, but again, Oda, Demonio Robin, please. As for the other Straw Hats, it is hard not to notice that the monster trio was still very much missing from the action in this chapter, so that's 2 chapters in a row now that we haven't seen them, which can only lead me to think, oh my god, Oda must have something huge, something really, really special for their entrance, because I thought it was gonna happen this week, but seeing as that spot was reserved for Scopper, Oda is planning something massive. He's getting ready to cook. But aside from all the action in 1148, Oda was really good at weaving in these emotional beats alongside the hype combat in this chapter. The dilemma of the Elbathians arguing between themselves what to do. Do they burn down the library? Do they save their children? How do they respond to this threat to the core of Elbath? It just felt really real to me. It hit me a lot more than I expected. The ideological and purist stance of basically we don't negotiate with terrorists versus hang on, those are real kids we're talking about. They're my kids. We can't afford to be principled. You could really feel that dilemma of what are you giving up if you give in? And it actually kind of made me personally contemplate on where I would stand if I was faced with this sort of same choice. Sophie's choice. And so in the face of that dilemma, the fact that Ronya, this little girl, despite her age, the fact that she was so clearly able to articulate herself and put the good of Elbath before her own life, show that sort of courage, that bravery. She is a supreme king for sure. That is exactly the type of Elbathian will, the Conqueror's will that I was talking about earlier. Her speech definitely brought a tear to my eye. Oda really knew how to play and hit that emotional beat here. And I think it's all the more meaningful that it is in fact in response to Ronya being so poised, so dignified, so courageous. This is what makes Jarul ultimately make his decision to save the children. He basically does the opposite of what she says, and it's so understandable why. I mean, how could you let her die? Not to mention that it may also be because it's in his own interest to let the history and let the culture of Elbath burn, because I haven't yet taken Jarul off my list of suspicious potential conspirators of Elbath. He and Angie are really throwing me off, because the fact that Summers' demand is for them to burn down the books, whereas we know that King Harold, he was the one that essentially commissioned the school for the Elbathian children. He is the one that really seems to have promoted the deep cultural roots of Elbath, just minus its violence. That's really making me think and wonder whether I've misjudged King Harold all along. Maybe King Harold wasn't a bad guy? I guess we're just gonna have to wait and see. And we are gonna have to wait a little longer than expected because it is a break week after chapter 1148, but never fear because I am here and I will make sure you don't run dry of One Piece content. So like I said, if you're not already, please subscribe to the channel. If you enjoyed today's discussion, please leave a like, please share the video, and please leave a comment on your thoughts about what the actual answer to the regen abilities are going to be. What you thought about this chapter, what you're expecting for future chapters. Let me know your thoughts by leaving a comment below. You can also support the channel further by becoming a Patreon or channel member like these wonderful, wonderful people. But as always, thank you so much for listening to another one of my ramblings. This is JoyGirl, and I'll see you again soon.